The Midnight Goblins. There once lived, many, many years ago, a poor shoemaker and his wife. The man worked very hard at making shoes, but somehow things went wrong for him. People did not pay their bills, his wife fell ill and had to have good food that took all their savings, and altogether the shoemaker was in a very bad way. At last a day came when he had just enough money to buy the leather to make one more pair of shoes, and that was all. He bought it and he carefully cut out the shoes that evening.
"See, wife," he said, "this is my last pair of shoes. I will sew them up tomorrow and hope to sell them. If I do not, I cannot tell where the money for our next meal will come from."
"Poor husband," said the woman, "you have worked so hard and so honestly. Surely good luck will come to us, even though this is the very last pair of shoes you have the money to make." The man put the cut-out shoes ready on a shelf, thinking to finish them early the next morning. Then he went to bed and fell sound asleep. Early next morning he got up and drew the shutters back to let in the morning sun, so that he could see to finish the shoes. Then he saw something that made him stand still in the greatest astonishment. There on the shelf, where he'd put the cut-out leather the night before, lay a pair of beautiful little shoes. The shoemaker could hardly believe his eyes. He stared and stared. Then he crossed over to the shelf and picked up the shoes.
"Marvel of marvels," he cried. "They're better made than if I'd made them myself. Every stitch is in the right place, and every nail neatly hammered home. This is indeed a mystery. Wife, what do you make of this?" His wife was just as astonished as he was.
"It's magic, husband," she said, "but it's good magic, so put the shoes in the window and see if you can sell them." The man put the shoes in the empty window. Very soon a customer came by and was so pleased with the look of the lovely shoes that he offered the shoemaker twice as much as he expected to get. The cobbler was delighted and ran in to tell his wife what good luck had come to him.
"There is enough money to buy bread for both of us and leather for 2 more pairs of shoes," said the shoemaker.
He went out to buy the bread and brought home some more leather. He cut out the 2 pairs of shoes and laid them on the shelf, ready to begin work early the next morning. Then he went to bed, and he and his wife slept soundly. The next day he got up and took down the shutters as usual. He turned to look at his bench, and lo and behold, there was his leather neatly made into 2 beautiful pairs of shoes again.
"There must surely be magic here,"
said the cobbler, very much puzzled. He took the shoes up in his hands and was delighted to see they were just as well made as the pair the night before. He put them in the window, and they had not been there 5 minutes before they were sold, for the passers-by thought they looked so comfortable and so well made. The shoemaker could hardly believe his good luck, for he was paid far more for them than ever he'd been paid for shoes before.
"I shall buy meat for us, wife," he said, "and I will buy you new ribbons for your bonnet. Even then I shall have enough money left over to pay for the leather for 4 more pairs of shoes."
He went out and he bought the meat and the ribbons. Out of the new leather he cut 4 pairs of shoes, and as usual put them up on the bench to finish early next morning. When he pulled the shutters down, he was not surprised to see the 4 pairs of shoes standing already made on the shelf, stitched as neatly as ever. He had no difficulty in selling them for a very good price, and this time bought enough leather for 8 pairs of shoes. Next morning they were all standing ready for him, and so it went on night after night, morning after morning. No matter how many dozens of shoes the shoemaker put out to finish in the morning, they were always ready for him, standing neatly in long rows on his bench. He sold them for a lot of money and soon became very rich indeed, for the fame of his beautifully made shoes spread far and wide, and folk came from all over the place to buy them. Even the king had at last sent for a dozen pairs, and then the shoemaker's fortune was indeed made, for everyone wanted to go to the same shoemaker as the king did. Now Christmas time came near, and the shoemaker's wife began to wonder if they could do a turn of some sort to the mysterious helpers. "Husband," she said, "let us sit up tonight to try and find out who it is that comes to help us each night."
"We will," said the shoemaker.
So that night the shoemaker and his wife hid themselves behind a curtain in the shop. They left a lit candle on the table so they could see who came in, and they waited patiently until the clock struck 12. Immediately the clock tolled 12, the door of the shop flew open, and in skipped 2 of the funniest little goblins ever seen. They were very tiny and had hardly any claws on, so they shivered and took in the cold December night as they danced about the table and tried to keep themselves warm. When they had finished dancing about, they went to where the leather lay cut out on the bench and sat down by it. They sat cross-legged, just as the shoemaker did when he sat to make shoes. They threaded their needles and began to stitch. Stitch, stitch, stitch they went, so fast that the shoemaker could not follow the thread with his eyes. Then they hammered away, and one by one the pairs of shoes were put on the bench, all neatly and prettily made. In the midst of their work, the goblins began to shiver so much with the cold that they had to get up and jump about to warm themselves. The shoemaker and his wife watched in wonder. They could hardly believe their eyes when they saw the shoes being made so quickly. Long before dawn, they were all finished and set out on the bench ready for the shoemaker to find in the morning. Then the goblins jumped down off the table and disappeared out of the door.
"Well, well, well," cried the shoemaker as soon as they had gone. "Did you ever know such kind wee folk as those to come and help a poor man in his trouble like that? I do wish I could do something in return."
"So you can," said his wife. "Did you notice how cold they were? The poor little things had hardly any clothes on. I will tell you what we can do. I will make them each a set of warm clothes, and you can make them a pair of tiny shoes." The shoemaker thought that was a very good idea. His wife bought some pieces of scarlet cloth and some lovely soft wool. Then she put on her thimble and she began to sew little trousers as neatly as she could. She knitted 2 little coats as well, and very handsome they looked with tiny green buttons down each side. Then she knitted them the tiniest pair of stockings each, so small that they looked even too small for a doll. The shoemaker was not idle. He made 2 pairs of red shoes, the tiniest ones that could be imagined, with little white buttons on each side. He was very proud of them when he had finished, for they were the daintiest and neatest things he'd ever made. When Christmas Eve came, the shoemaker did not put the usual array of cut-out leather shoes on the bench for the goblins to finish, but put instead the 2 little suits with the tiny red shoes on top. Then he and his wife hid themselves once more behind the curtain to see what would happen. Exactly as the clock struck 12, in hopped the 2 goblins as before, and skipped about to get themselves warm before setting down to work. Then they went to the bench to make the shoes. They were struck with astonishment when they saw the little scarlet suits of claws waiting there for them. They picked them up with many little cries and calls of delight, and then began to dress themselves in them as fast as they ever could. When they came to the red stockings, they screamed with joy, and as for the shoes, well, the goblins could hardly get them on, they were so pleased and excited. When at last they were dressed, they danced around and around the shop, singing and shouting for joy, and the shoemaker and his wife were delighted to see that the clothes and the shoes fitted the goblins perfectly. "Smart little goblins now are we, dressed in the finest of suits you can see, never again will we shoemakers be." The goblins sang this song again and again as they danced about, and then suddenly rushed out into the night. They never came back again after that to sew any more shoes for the shoemaker, but he was so rich that he needed no more help and never lacked for money again. But the curious thing was that every Christmas Eve after that, the 2 goblins visited the shop to see if there were any new suits for them to replace the old ones that were beginning to wear out. And of course, the shoemaker and his wife always put some ready, knowing that on Christmas morning they would find them gone.